Hi, everyone, and welcome to Right in Front of My Face, the podcast talking about big things happening right in front of us. I am your host, Shannon Hull, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 3 of season 2. This episode features a person I connected with after donating to the cause she single-handedly created. My guest, Ellen Kuwana, started WeGotThisSeattle.org herself on March 13th. It was a bit accidental, as her initial intent was just to gather some funds so she could donate a meal to the lab technicians and scientists at the UW Virology Lab. Ellen's background is in labs, she'll tell you all about it, but she wanted to do something simple to show gratitude to the people who were on the front line of the pandemic, working around the clock to process the first COVID-19 tests. And as most genuine things do, her efforts snowballed. Fast forward 6 months, Ellen has single-handedly raised over $75,000 and fed over 18,000 frontline healthcare workers, mainly with the help of her daughter's friends who are home from college. I donated to Ellen's first couple of efforts after seeing them on Twitter, but had no idea that it was one person behind this huge effort to feed lab staff at the University of Washington. I invited Ellen to come on and tell her story, and it took a second to get the interview actually on the books. When we first talked, Ellen's energy was bubbly and high. She was excited and ready for the next phase of her mission. But then, 6 weeks later, when we actually sat down together, the energy from both of us was markedly different. This was the first time in 6 months Ellen had been in a house that wasn't her own, and we sat together, masked, with the doors and windows open about 10 feet apart, and talked about how sad and tired we are, how COVID fatigue had set in with both of us, and that grief was coming through more clearly than the energy we felt weeks ago. Our conversation took a different turn than I'd anticipated, but grief is funny that way. What follows is the story of how one woman cared enough to feed some lab workers who needed a morale boost, and how that genuine concern and care turned into an effort that has touched 18,000 frontline workers in the Pacific Northwest. I'm sitting here with Ellen Kuwana, founder of We Got This Seattle, and I knew you, but I didn't know you because I donated to, I think, one of the first iterations of We Got This Seattle. It was a pizza party for the UW Virology Lab. And I want to say it was maybe the third week in March, first week in April, something like that, where it came across my Twitter feed. And I thought, well, this is about the coolest thing, because I had started following the UW Virology Lab, obviously knowing that they were the ones that were working so hard on COVID lab processing. And I thought it was about the coolest idea I'd ever heard. And so I donated to the pizza party, got on the mailing list. Then I donated to an Agua Verde Taco Tuesday for all the researchers and just thought it was the coolest thing. And so I had kind of watched it snowball from afar. And I had a guest on season 1 named Allie, who's the Seattle fertility doula. And Allie messaged me on Twitter and she said, hey, you should interview this woman. And she connected me to your Twitter feed. And I said, yes, I need to interview this person because I donated to this and thought it was such a great idea. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
For me, your work during this time has been like a beacon in the darkness, because truly I thought, here is somebody who is taking this job on of feeding frontline healthcare workers. That's what We Got This Seattle is all about, is providing nutrition and sort of the sunshine committee for these people working in labs who are actually helping advance science. So, Ellen, I want to start off where I usually start off. I just want to hear a little bit about you and your background, because you are a very passionate scientist yourself.
Okay. I'm already tearing up. I mean, it's so nice to hear. And I heard on Twitter last night from somebody I don't know just how much the social media posts and hearing about this project has helped her through this time. It's so helpful for me too, because I think we're all struggling right now, 6 months into this. And so that's so lovely. Thank you so much. I do have a science background. Both my parents are chemists. My husband's a scientist. And, you know, this starts with me following a boy to California right after I graduated from high school and college, and ended up at UCSF, which is number 1 or number 2 for graduate school. worked in labs for a few years, and then went to graduate school. There was a short-lived program to get your master's that was trying to get more minorities into science. So my program was fully paid for, and I have a master's in neuroscience and many, many years of research experience after that at UW, and then Seattle Children's in bioethics. I was doing communications and research. That background of working with chemicals that if you touch your face, you'll end up with a permanent blue stain from cell stain on your face for several days, or working with radioactivity, teaches you how to put on gloves very carefully, take them off very carefully. And you train yourself really not to touch your face without realizing it. And so that background in the beginning, when we, didn't know how much COVID or the novel coronavirus was transmitted through surfaces, for example, it just gave me the confidence to think, I actually want to do these deliveries myself. I want to pick up the food. I want to deliver it to the healthcare or the frontline sites. And I don't want to put anybody else in danger. And I think I can do this fairly safely. Of course, part of me just wanted to curl up in my house and not do anything.
Right.
But because my husband works in a hospital, early on, my youngest daughter, was still in high school and going to school and coming back, even when I was fairly panicked from following on Twitter what was happening in Italy and had happened in China, and knowing we were 10 days lagging where they were. I just knew it was going to get bad.
See, it's so interesting too and I think I have gravitated a lot to science. I am not a scientist. I have a degree in marketing, but I think as this started to unfold, for me, knowing that there were people out there who still are, 6 months in, working 24-hour days, literally working 24 hours a day to try to figure this out, to help humanity, has been something that's very reassuring to me. And so I could see how, as a scientist, you're like, I'm literally the only person that can do this. And so for you, I want to hear about how it started, though, where you knew that there were people working in labs, right? That's a big piece of your background. So you know that there are people at UW who are working 3 8-hour shifts in a row to process the first coronavirus test.
Yes. So Twitter is an amazing platform in terms of getting information, which is what you were using it for. And I was as well. I wanted to, read those firsthand accounts of people from, China, and people, physicians who'd been through it, and nurses in Italy and families. I think in times of uncertainty, you want to grab onto that information, and it had direct relevance to our situation here and the first cases in Seattle. And that was so scary, and really not knowing how quickly it was going to increase and, go through the community. So I was following a bunch of the scientists from the Hutch and also from UW Virology. There's a lot of overlap. A lot of them have appointments at, the Hutch and UW as well. And
I agree with you. The coolest thing about Twitter is that all of a sudden, these people are able to really share their information with the public. And it was incredible for me to be like, whoa, they are really sharing what's going on here.
And it's also amazing how quickly you can get a response. So I was scrolling through Twitter, 2 a.m. in the morning when I couldn't sleep and was, trying to read and get information. And there was a tweet from UW Virology and one of the scientists at the Hutch. And then right under it was one from, I think, Tutabella saying, if you're a healthcare worker, we'll give you 10% off if you, order pizza. And I thought, oh, that's, I filed that away, like, oh, we should order from them. But then I also thought, like, oh, what a great idea. And at the time I was working 2 jobs, and I thought, I can afford to spend some of my money and order pizza for UW Virology. And I picked them because, when there's a crisis like this, people think first of the doctors and the nurses and the other people in the healthcare teams. And so I just wanted to give some, as you said, appreciation to UW Virology, because people don't think about the people who are working in the labs as much.
No, I don't think they do. I think that's true. I think they're not as visible, but the work that they're doing is arguably some of the most important work there is.
Exactly. And there is, risk to them. I have done bench research, and some people can sit and do it, or you sit on a higher stool, but I have to stand, and it's fairly, active, even if you're pipetting for 8, 9, 10 hours.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give them some TLC, and I just tweeted, in the middle of the night, I think, to 3 pizza places and said, does anybody want to help me, get pizza to UW Virology? And I was hoping for a discount, let's be honest, tugging at the heartstrings. And, Pagliacci within a few minutes was like, we're in, contact us. And then they ended up just saying we want to donate it all. And they ended up donating more than $5,000 to my project. And it was so important because they also had the delivery mechanism already in place, because I'm just one person. And when it ramped up, it was really hard for me to be everywhere at once.
So, I think this is what I want to point out too, is that this is you, scared, mom of 2 kids who are now home, trying to figure out digital learning, working 2 jobs. And at 2 a.m, you're like, I got to do something. Right. And I think that is the power of one person just being like, I don't know what else to do.
Exactly. I say a lot, it sounds trite, but really one person can make a difference. And I think that's very important to stress. And it could be, hey, just when you go to the grocery store, pick up 5 extra chocolate bars, find out who in your neighborhood is a healthcare worker or works at a grocery store, or works at a preschool, and get the chocolate to them and have them take it to work. I didn't have the intention for this to landslide into what it's become. And it's a good thing I didn't have that idea in my head. If I had thought, like, I'm going to try to feed almost 20,000 people in 6 months, I don't think I would have set out to do it. So I just had that one intention to get pizza to UW Virology.
So Pagliacci gets on board. Then what happens?
Well, then they said, we're going to donate that entire meal. And they handed me a receipt, and I looked at it, and it was almost $500. And I sort of thought, like, that would have been a lot. There's not extra money in our lives right now, and it would have been worth it, and I would have done it. But I sort of had this, kind of dodged the bullet there on that one. But then I thought, okay, so why don't I take $200 and buy a meal for UW Medical Center? So I contacted my friend Andrew Rubenstein, who makes bagels. And I know it's just him in the kitchen. And again, we weren't really sure how everything was transmitted. So I was starting with places that I knew and either liked the food or trusted the person making the food. So the second one was bagels to UW Medical Center, and they were thrilled. And that wasn't very expensive. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to try another restaurant, and I'll just pay and maybe ask for a discount, because restaurants were still open then. So the third one was Taste of India, which is one of our favorites. And I tend to be a high energy, fast talker. And so I got on the phone, and this is probably March 20th, and things are fairly bad in Seattle. We're the epicenter. I'm spending way too much time watching the news, and I just know everything about it. And my kids are like, oh my gosh, Mom, you need to calm down. So I call Taste of India, and I say, hi, I'm Ellen Kuwana. I'm sort of starting this project called We Got the Seattle to get food to frontline workers. And UW Virology is working 3 8-hour shifts. They're working 24/7, and I'm just going on and on. And the man, the owner, he's so kind, and he's so calm always. He just says, Ellen, what do you need? We'll donate it all. And something about, even when you're speaking to somebody on the phone, and I could visualize him because we go there all the time, something about his calmness and his just immediate reaction made me very emotional, and I got teary-eyed. And I posted that on Twitter with a picture. And for whatever reason, and I'm glad it did, it really resonated. And my kids came down the next morning as I was having my coffee, and they're like, Mom, you've gone viral. And I said, what do you mean? And I looked at that tweet, and it had more than 2.5 million people had seen that tweet on Twitter in its original form, and 31,000 retweets or whatever. And so from there, it really spiraled into people emailing and Facebook messaging, texting me if they had my phone number, direct message on Twitter. So I thought, I should probably set up a website, get a separate email from my Gmail that I was giving out. And then, every day I was checking sort of Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, text, my personal email, and the We Got This Seattle.org email.
This
so 6
is
things.
you.
This is me. And I was working 2 jobs until April 10th. But I think parents don't realize, or maybe even people don't realize, the wealth of skills that you've amassed in your life. I'm 51. I've done the PTA things. I've been in charge of the auction. I'm a shameless networker. And you sort of learn to advocate for yourself. And I figure there's no harm in asking. So I will always ask. So I put up a Facebook fundraiser and asked my friends and only people in Seattle and the subset of my friends who I thought, I know they'll feel obligated to give, but it won't be too much of a hardship for them. Right. So I carefully selected who I asked to contribute to that Facebook fundraiser. And it was amazing. You could almost watch it in real time tick upwards. And I thought it'd be great if I could get $800. And I had, I don't even know, 1,000 in under a day, just with a few friends that I had invited. So very quickly, I shut that one down at 35,000 and found a 501c3, which is what's on the website, to collect the funds. And I could just upload receipts and not have to deal with the money. And I spent all that Facebook money very quickly.
We're going to take a quick break. I am sitting here with John Gruss from Element Mortgage. Talk to me about mortgages.
Yes, crazy. It is an absolutely crazy market out there. If you've been paying attention to anything in the news, you've heard that interest rates are at historically low levels. That is true. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the 2 major government entities, have reported that the interest rates currently are at the lowest level they have ever seen. So it's definitely an exciting time in the industry right now for us.
So I've owned a house for 16 years and I still don't fully understand the mortgage business.
Not something you do every day. That's okay.
It's not. So tell me a little bit about where you're licensed to do business and who can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. We're actually licensed in 48 states through our parent company, which is American Pacific Mortgage. Our brand, Element Mortgage, we have 4 locations based in Washington, California, Colorado, and Hawaii. So in terms of working directly with us, that's our footprint. But if you're in any of the other 48 states, we have the ability to assist.
So the line that always gets me is whatever you've got, we've got you. Tell me a little bit about the philosophy behind Element Mortgage.
Really, it's about focusing on the consumer and their needs and providing options. You hear about refinancing right now. Well, what does that mean? Should I refinance? I'm already maybe a few years into my loan. Does it make sense? With where interest rates are today, it absolutely is worth it to explore your options. And that's what we provide. We provide an expert element. That's part of our business. We're local, so we know what's going on in the local market area. And again, as you mentioned, the human element. It's a major part of this. Again, you don't buy or refinance a home very often. So it is important to have a team that's behind you that you can trust when going through a major transaction like this.
Thank you so much for your support of Right in Front of My Face.
My pleasure.
And if anybody needs John, his information will be up in the show notes. And how do they get in touch with you, John?
Easy. Give me a call, 206-954-4787, or hit our website, elementmortgage.com. John Gruss, NMLS number 1108421. Element Mortgage is a division of American Pacific Mortgage, NMLS number 1850, equal housing opportunity.
I'm back and talking with Ellen Kuwana of We Got This Seattle. The other thing I find, and I can only speak for myself, I want to do something. There's just like this overwhelming feeling of powerlessness, which you were able to translate into like, this is an actionable thing that I can figure out how to do. That would not have occurred to me. And so, that first time when I donated to your first pizza fund, it was like, oh my God, this is like a real thing that people need that will be truly needed.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm so frugal with my own money, and I've had to be. My husband is an MD, PhD, trained for a really long time. Seattle's very expensive. Yeah. We were in San Francisco before this. You learn to be frugal and, clip the coupons or ask for the discount or whatever. And so I pledged to people when I was asking for their money that I was going to use it in the same way as my own money. And I've really stayed true to that. And 100% of the donations until June 30th, there was no fee taken by the 501c3. So 100% of that has gone to ordering food from local restaurants. And very quickly, it became apparent that the restaurants were struggling. And again, these sort of late night conversations that I've had with people over Facebook Messenger or Twitter direct message or even text, a Thai restaurant had contacted me near UW and they donated several meals. And she and I would tend to talk late at night, like, okay, what do you need? Okay, I need food for Swedish Hospital's mobile COVID-19 testing unit on Monday. Can I pick up at 11:30? And we, this happens between midnight and 2 a.m., coordinating these things. And so kind of as we were like, okay, we're all set, I took the time to just say, how are you doing? Like, how are you doing personally? How's your restaurant doing? And this was the end of March, I believe, or the first week of April. And, you get those 3 dots and you're waiting for the person. I'm thinking like, okay, she's typing. And I get this message back that she says, I'm crying right now because you're a virtual stranger, even though you don't feel like a stranger. But she said, nobody's asked me that. Nobody's asked us that. We have 4 kids. One of them's a nurse. We feel very strongly that we want to do something and we want to make food. That's what we know how to do. And we want to give back. And she sent me a screenshot. And she said, I sent my landlord, $200 yesterday, $100 the week before. But, all the UW students were gone. So I was learning for the restaurants that business was down 80 to 90% and they couldn't make their rent. And I had, this Facebook fundraiser going. So I had to convince her over several conversations to take money from me. And I say, you've already done the right thing. I mean, I know you have a good heart. I know you're helping people. Let me help you because I can't make the food, but I can pay for it. And it's not my,
right.
People are donating money to make this happen. I mean, the other wonderful thing about this project is just forging these relationships. And these are going to be lifelong friendships because you've got, it's sort of like I don't like the war analogy, but it's like going through boot camp or something. You're going through something intense with a group of people.
I mean, I'm sitting here and I can feel your raw emotion about this, right? Like you carry this burden of not only the people that you're feeding, but the people that you're taking donations from. And that is a really big, heavy thing to shoulder. Talk to me about how this is impacting you, like on an emotional level, because this is a big deal to take on.
I think I was doing really well for the first few months. I kept saying to people, when they're like, oh, we'll get back to you tomorrow. And I was like, it can be a few days. I was coordinating so many things. I had to sort of say, like, not everything has to be done tomorrow. But yeah, it has taken its toll, I realize, in that, and I don't know how much of it is just sort of that mom personality of wanting, parent personality of wanting to take care of somebody. And also so many of our friends are healthcare workers and I know how tired they are. I know what they've been going through. I think we're just all tired right now. Yeah. And it has been a lot at times because you never know what you're getting yourself into. I've, been outside of hospitals when somebody has pulled up and I thought, oh, is my car in the way? And so I jump in my car to kind of move it forward because there are 2 lanes in front of the semicircle in front of the hospital door. And the guy gets out of his car and basically collapses. And I'm the only one out there, so I'm like yelling for help. And the nurse who just brought the food in that I delivered comes running back out, sees him, gets a wheelchair. He doesn't have a mask on. She's bending over him. I'm concerned for her. So I run in and I get, one of the disposable masks and I'm asking his permission to put it on. And I'm, right in his face trying to get the mask on him. I've literally followed fire trucks back to the fire station and said, I've got all this donated water, Essentia water in my car. Would you like some? In early March, going up to a police car with an open window and no lights on, and he's just sitting outside a grocery store. And I think like he's taking a little break, and I park 3 parking spots away and kind of wave to get his attention so I don't startle him. And I'm like, hey, I have these donated cookies. The hospital only took 3 out of the 4 boxes. It's 10 o'clock at night. Could you take these back, to the station? And he said very calmly, oh, thank you so much, ma'am, but we're in the middle of an armed robbery. So if you could please get back into your car and drive away. And I thought kind of like, oh, that's the last time I did that. I was like, oh, Ellen, you're an idiot. Like you're going to put yourself in a situation where something happens, right?
I could totally see myself doing the same thing.
Right.
100%.
I was just like, I'm tired. I don't want to, park and go into UW and deliver the cookies. Like, oh, here's somebody right here that I could give the cookies to. But I think I'm just one of those people who sort of takes on other people's burdens or pain.
I can feel that from you. Absolutely. And I mean, I think the heart that it takes to throw yourself into a project like this when it's not actually your job, but I think it speaks to the level of having the right idea at the right time. But I want to say also, you and I have had to reschedule this interview like 4 times. Mm-hmm. And so when we first talked, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of momentum. And then slowly over the last probably month, that tone has changed a bit from you. And so I want to hear where you're at right now. Because now what's your total? You were looking at your spreadsheet when you came here.
Yeah, so I had, I'm a, scientist at heart and also a science journalist. So I, of course, wanted the numbers. And I stayed up till 3:30 last night trying to update my spreadsheet. So I would have the numbers for you to give you an idea. I know we're between 18,000 and 19,000 people that we've gotten food and drinks, coffee and water too. Since March 13th. And I have had help. There was a woman and I, didn't know her. And again, she saw a post on Facebook or Twitter and she reached out, Signe Burke, she works at Amazon. And she really jumped in there for a while when my energy was down and helped me out so much. And then there are people who've helped me with spreadsheets. I've really tried to post everything on social media because it's the way to get the word out. And I hope to encourage and compel people to donate because I couldn't have done this without those donations. Everything was going on my personal credit card until I found the 501c3 and then reimbursing myself and then the social media posting and then contacting and coordinating with all the sites. I mean, each delivery takes at least an hour and probably a few hours to coordinate,
and late at night.
Yeah. And then at least an hour to do the social media well. You know that. And I didn't even photo edit my photos or anything before I put them up. But starting March 13th for that month, I got food to almost 1,500 people, spent about $3,000 and had about $8,000 in food donated. And then April was the busiest month for sure. We got food to almost 7,000 people. We paid $25,000 to restaurants. And that's all at a discounted rate. But you figure UW Virology, specimen processing at UW, those 2 different groups have 90 to 100 people.
Yeah.
So even at $10 a meal, you're already at $1,000 for lunch or dinner.
Easily.
Yeah. So that month was $55,000 worth of food delivered in Seattle. And then May was also 6,000 people, so just down a little bit. And again, like $44,000 worth of food delivered.
All procured by you. All delivered
most by
you.
me. Yeah. April was 137 deliveries that month. So there were some months we had 8 to 12 deliveries going. So I hired a few of my daughter's college friends who were already delivering for Pagliacci or Bridwell, and had them, picking up food. And I had sort of made a protocol, which is similar to what Frontline Food or Off Their Plate, which were 2 organizations under the World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres, celebrity chef umbrella. And they had, written out protocols. Mine, I just, told the delivery drivers and lined it up ahead of time with the restaurant owners to keep everybody safe. I said, I'm going to pay over the phone with my personal credit card. I need the driver to call the restaurant at the, agreed upon time. They're going to pull up, they're going to open their trunk or their car. They're going to step back to the front of their car. You're going to come out, you're going to load the food in the trunk. And this was before masks were mandated.
Yeah.
And I had already had it fortuitously where the driver is up by the driver's side door and the person comes and loads the food into the trunk or the back seat. So they were already separated. Luckily, to my knowledge, nobody got sick through this project, which was very important to me. I didn't want to risk anybody's safety, which is why I was trying to do it all myself, but I couldn't. And then at the healthcare site, it's lined up where we call or we text. They come out with a cart. Same thing. We open the trunk. They don't touch the car. They unload the food. They go away. We step out. We close the trunk. We drive away. So I was very serious about safety.
So tell me how, it's like the number between 18,000 and 19,000 people served and fed and restaurants rent paid and all of these things. How the last time we spoke, I think what you said was, I'm not sure that this project is going to continue moving forward. Tell me where you're at.
I don't know where I'm at, to be brutally honest. The thought of giving this up is painful because I know going into late fall and winter, there's going to be such a huge need again. And my definition, and when I wrote the mission statement for the project, I intentionally crafted it to be very broad. So for me, frontline worker is grocery store clerks, preschool teachers, homeless shelter staff, anybody who is at risk of getting COVID-19 because they're an essential worker, because they're at work, because they're interfacing with the public.
Yeah, the privilege to be able to do your job from home is real.
It is. And as I said, part of me, in an alternative universe, I would have just been home, working from home. But because my husband works in a hospital, I, like many other families, we've had that conversation. What if he gets sick? Yeah. What do we do as a family? That's very real to healthcare workers and their families. So you start to think, okay, if he gets sick, if I get sick, what happens? And I didn't want to have just sat in my house and have done nothing. To me, that just wasn't acceptable to me in my own personal risk benefit. What do I want to do with my life? And honestly, if I get sick and die, what do I want to have done with my life? Not to be overly dramatic, but I think a lot of people have sort of gone through that thought process, right? A lot of people are changing jobs or, adopting puppies or learning something that they've always wanted to do. Yep.
Well, my husband is, he's a pediatric dentist. And so, we kind of laugh. It's like, he's not an essential worker, but he actually really is. Like, kids' health is really important right now. And so he had to go back. And similar to you, when your family members start seeing 50 families a day, that they're super protected. Like, that wasn't necessarily my fear, but it's more like, how do we keep him going to work, right? He's not in a COVID unit in the ER. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different deal. And dentist practice, like, there's a pandemic.
Anyway.
And so that wasn't necessarily the issue for us, but it was like, you have to get real when you're like, well, we're out there in the world now as safely as we possibly can be, but here we are. And what happens if, and those are hard conversations to have, but also it's like, how do you support your family in the best way? And then how do you say, I want to be on the right side of this somehow, some way. I want to be on the right side of this hellscape that we are living in.
Exactly. And to be honest, I think throwing myself into being busy was a way for me to control the anxiety that I was feeling about sort of the hellscape and everything that was going on, and reading too much and kind of knowing those early reports about, oh my gosh, look at what this virus is doing to the lungs or the, cardiovascular system, and sort of my catastrophizing about that. And part of why I'm sharing on social media sometimes when I'm like, I posted last night, I'm really tired, is that I feel sometimes social media can almost misrepresent where, probably we've all as parents had those spring breaks where, we didn't do anything because my husband had to work, and, we tried to do small fun things, but we weren't in Hawaii, or we weren't, up in the mountains. And my daughter would say, everybody's at the beach. And I would correct her and say, no, everybody who's posting a picture to social media is at the beach. Those other people who are sitting at home aren't posting to social media. So you're getting, not quite a full picture. And part of me being honest on social media about my struggles, and I'm usually not an anxious person at all, has just been this idea of trying to represent where I am at the moment.
Yeah.
And just being more honest about that. I think it was end of April, and I quit my main job. That was 4 days a week, but a bigger job than that. I quit that job April 10th and went down to one job editing for a journal, maybe 15 or 20 hours a week. And then this project was definitely 40, 50 hours a week.
For sure.
So by the end of April, I was tired. And for a lot of families, sort of March and maybe into the first part of April, when it really peaked in Seattle, was a lot of tension and battles within the household of, can I do this, Mom? Can we have a family meeting and talk about, can I do this? And I was really just batten down the hatches and get through this pretty restrictive note. And so, there were a lot of like, oh, you're being unreasonable, or discussions about this. And that sort of just added to the difficulty and the fatigue as a parent trying to navigate this. And, my husband was much more like, no, we know how to keep ourselves safe. Like, they should be able to go see their friends. And I was saying, no, it's just better if you don't.
Which is so hard, because we have had some of that in our house also, where one person, and it changes. Like, sometimes it changes where my husband sometimes is the more conservative one, and I'll be like, no, please, today, can we do this? But it changes hands. And so I think that tension and that desire to help, it's exhausting. And, before I started recording, you and I were talking about something, and I think it goes deeper than your project and deeper than we got this Seattle. But there's a fatigue that I feel like as a society, we are hitting this fatigue point, and I am for sure. And, we are 3 weeks into digital learning, and I have sat on my bed at the end of the day, just bone tired, mentally, emotionally just drained, because I have so much grief. And I've really identified that in myself. It's like I've hit this period where, okay, we've now been in the 6 months. We've all done the action items. We've all been cheerleading. We've all been, putting our best foot forward. But now that grief train has caught up to me. And I feel like I'm hearing some of that from you also.
Yes. So it's making me consider, I don't see how this is sustainable as I've been doing it for the next 6 months. And, essentially I was running a catering company, in that, sort of off their plate had a more sane model where they take donations, they partner with, a couple of restaurants, and they say, okay, you're going to crank out 200 of the same meals, and then your restaurant is responsible for delivering those to these different sites, this hospital, this medical clinic. Mine grew organically. So I would have, a nurse from Overlake and Bellevue on the night shift say, our team hasn't gotten any treats. The day shift gets all of them. And I'd really like to support the international district, is what she said, which I was all in for. It was very important for me to help restaurants in the international district who are struggling, and to make sure I had, a lot of diversity within the type of restaurants, the size of the restaurants, and also ownership. So early on, I would guess easily more than half of my restaurants, 75% of my restaurants were minority owned, several Black owned. And because so many restaurants were struggling, I just kept adding restaurants. And so that's another level where you have to show them how to submit their invoices to the system that I set up on the website.
Well, yeah, and it's not like you do this for a living either.
Right.
Like you're just piecemealing it together the best you can.
Right. And then UW Virology, like instead of just saying I'm delivering you 92 of the same meals, I knew one person had a garlic allergy. They had 8 vegetarians, really
so you're tailoring. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, 12 deliveries a day, they're all different numbers. They're from Providence, Everett to Bellevue, Overlake to Shoreline.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And then, maybe 7 different drivers going. And, as a mom, you're checking like, okay, did you pick that up? Checking with the site. Did the driver get there on time? And then something always, nothing ever goes smoothly.
Correct.
Right. So I had one friend that I had known from elementary school days with our kids. She contacted me and wanted to help drive. And in May and June, I was like, yes, I need help. And she called and she'd picked up food from Simply Soulful, was delivering it to some kind of shelter. And she shows up. We had confirmed on Tuesday. We delivered the food on Thursday. They had moved.
The shelter had moved?
The shelter had moved. And there was no sign about where they had moved. And I was on a webinar or board meeting or something. And I was like, okay, just bring the 40 meals to my house. And then I had to call around and
find places for them.
Yeah. And then deliver to 3 different sites. And, it took me 2.5 hours. But, I was hell bent on getting those meals delivered.
So, I mean, that the grief that you're feeling, the responsibility that you bear, what's going to happen?
I do want this project to continue in some form. And I'm starting to put out feelers to see if maybe I could combine forces with other similar projects in some way. I'm much better set up now. When the Seattle sketcher for Seattle Times, we did a Zoom call and he sketched me at work and wrote a little blurb about my project that was in the Seattle Times. I was using this big paper calendar from Paper Source where I wrote in the tiniest print, the 12 different deliveries going on a day, who the contact person was, email, phone number of meals, cost, who was delivering it, and then a little checkbox, if it was done. And then I finally got some scheduling software that Signe helped me find, and then trying to put everything on the spreadsheet. So I'm much better set up now. I would say I've delivered to probably more than 80 sites and have more than 70 restaurants. So everything's ready to go. I would need to start fundraising again because we only have probably $2,000 left. And that's another reason I've sort of tapered off and I'm only doing deliveries Monday, Wednesday, Friday of donated goods. So I'm sort of slowed down a little bit on pause, what pause means to me, three times a week delivering things.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like too much of a pause.
Yeah, but it was, it had ramped up to 7 days a week. So this at least feels sustainable until I figure out what the next steps are.
So if anybody has any ideas.
Yeah, we got this. We got the Seattle
and you're hearing Ellen's.
Yeah, we got the Seattle at gmail.com. They can send me ideas. I have huge ideas. I have, let's contact Mackenzie, who, is half of Amazon, who is starting up her own philanthropy to support projects and people in Seattle.
Yeah, Mackenzie, if you're listening.
I've been thinking of approaching, sort of like I drive a Subaru or a Honda, would they want to chip in? I know Phil Smart Mercedes contributes to Seattle Children's. I have this list of people and organizations that I should contact. It's just been a matter of bandwidth and not having the time, and now kind of needing to recuperate some. But Signe Burke called Metro Bus Services and found out how many bus drivers there are and the different sites for sort of the distribution. And we had this idea, what if we could, within a day or within a week, feed all the bus drivers? Because that's another, population where they're dealing directly with the public. They're at risk. Are they going to be driving around with our windows open in the winter? Probably. I mean, we're fortunate that it's milder here and they can do that.
Yeah. I'm sitting here where by the way, this is my first in-person interview. And I don't know, six months. We're both sitting here with our masks on, the doors open.
This is the first house I've been in since March 1st. That's not my own.
Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I've
only gone to the grocery store twice, in part because my husband strangely loves grocery shopping and food.
I'm that way.
So he always contacts us on his way home from work and says, does anybody need anything in the grocery store?
I'm like, please let me leave this house. Please let me leave. I'll do whatever I have to do. Mask, gloves, I'll do it all.
Yeah. It's been a privilege when the city really locked down, it was strange to be out driving on I-5 and only see 2 other cars.
Yeah, it's just otherworldly.
It really was. And, part of what was really important to me to deliver food to UW Virology is they're off campus and all the restaurants near them had shut down, and not all of them have reopened. There was that, calculus the restaurants had to do of, did it make sense to open for only takeout? And people weren't out and about. Workers weren't in their usual places.
No.
So a lot of places weren't open. So UW Virology needed 3 meals a day. And sometimes I was providing 2. But again, people have been so appreciative.
Well, so that was going to be my next question is that, I think something that has kept you going probably longer than you initially thought was having your finger on the pulse of that gratitude.
Absolutely. And those personal connections of getting to know people, even though when you're handing off food, it's, 5 minutes here. But, sometimes I would see Lisa at UW Virology 2 or 3 times a day, and then lots and lots of email, in part because, a phone call, I never know what people are doing when they're at work. And if they're all in protective gear, they can't answer their cell phone. Email they can deal with when they have a chance. And then I had it in writing and didn't have to remember things or make my own notes. So I relied on email a lot for this. And then, like Lisa would say, I took on this project with the same professionalism and awareness of deadlines as I would a job, a paid gig. And so if I said I was going to be there Tuesday at noon, I was there Tuesday at noon. And so sometimes she would call me when some other donor or restaurant, there's some miscommunication or they flaked. And she would say, it's 1:00. Our lunch hasn't showed up. I called the restaurant. They have no record of it. Can you get us lunch? And because I had those connections with the restaurants, within an hour, I would have lunch to UW Virology, or she'd say, it's so-and-so's birthday. Can you get us 100 cupcakes?
I know, but that is a big weight to carry. And I understand why you're tired.
At the time, it definitely didn't feel like a weight. And I was just so glad that people were asking and were honest with what they needed.
Yeah.
Even if, like she said, it's, we need a cake or cupcakes. It's not necessary. It's like a frivolous thing. But then again, you're working so hard as a team, taking that time to sort of acknowledge somebody's birthday or having one extra break in the day or send people home with a treat.
Yeah.
Their world was revolving around their work.
We're going to take a quick break. I am so excited to welcome the second sponsor for Right in Front of My Face Season 2, Tracy Erickson from Compass Real Estate. Tracy, there are, I don't know the exact number, but there are a lot of real estate agents in the world. And I would like you to tell people about why they should choose you.
Well, I would say I'm a market expert. I truly do understand what it takes to sell a home for the highest price. And of course, I understand for my buyers what it takes to compete in this crazy Seattle market.
Which is not easy.
Which is not easy, no. But really, when it comes down to it, I'm a relationship person. I've worked really hard to build relationships with different agents and other realtors in the Seattle area. And I feel like that goes a really long way when one of my clients is making an offer on, another agent's listing, or they're making an offer on one of my clients' listings. I make it a priority to play nice in the sandbox, and that goes a long way.
I can relate because my priority in the interviews that I find and the stories that I'm helping tell, I tend to listen more than I talk.
Yeah.
How does that fit in with your philosophy as an agent?
Well, I just think that's a life lesson, but
I'm still learning.
Oh gosh. Well, I treat all of my clients like they're friends or family. This just isn't a transaction to me. This is a relationship. And when the transaction ends, our relationship doesn't. For most people, this is the biggest transaction of their life, and they're going to experience every range of emotion, from excited to stressed to happy to sad. And I am there with them every step of the way.
Tracy, I appreciate your philosophy and your outlook and your authenticity. And thank you very much for your support of Right in Front of My Face.
Yeah.
Tell people where they can find you.
Well, my phone number is 206-251-6351. You can also jump onto the Compass website, compass.com, and type my name in, Tracy Erickson, and find me there. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Tracy Erickson Homes.
And I would highly recommend that area because her stories are wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm back and talking with Ellen Kuwana of We Got This Seattle. I don't know a different way to articulate this point, but I do want to know kind of where you think we're going to be, because it's very interesting to be talking to somebody who started a project with like such vigor, who's now like, I'm tired and I don't know if I can keep doing this, which I think is probably how a lot of our healthcare workers feel. It's how a lot of parents feel. Like, I feel like your mood and your tone are so reflective of where we're at in general right now. When you take this person who's so vibrant, who's sitting by you, and you are admitting to like go to this vulnerable place of saying, I don't know if I can keep doing what I'm doing. I think that speaks volumes about where we have arrived, and especially in Seattle, where it's been a little bit more intense, I think, than
absolutely
a lot of other places, because it was the epicenter for so long, and really, like, pardon the pun, but really under a microscope for a long time.
I agree. I think people in Seattle and people in New York City know how bad it can get. And I still have friends in other parts of the country that I'm in contact with where it hasn't been as bad, who, are saying people won't wear their masks. People are having, large gatherings. And I just try to caution them that this is a novel virus. It's in the dang name. We don't know the long-term effects of this. And, when my college-age daughter was debating going back to, live in LA where the case rates have been increasing, just to be in her apartment and go to the grocery store because school is online, I said to her, you're an adult. We can talk about this as a family, but here's my perspective on it. What if we find out that if you get this when you're young, even a mild case, they're finding people have these long hauler symptoms, problems that don't go away. We don't know how that's going to affect your health. Does that make you more vulnerable to future infections or cancer or diabetes? We just don't know. What if you get it and it takes 15 years off your life? Then at this point where we don't know now, what's your risk benefit calculation of what's worth the risk to you? And thankfully she decided to stay home. She thinks it's just for a few months.
She's like, all right, Mom, I get it.
Yeah. But I'll say it. I'm scared for the winter,
Ellen, I think we all are. I was with my girlfriend last night out on my deck, and we just looked at each other and we're like, thank God that we have each other, because you know, the reality of picking teams is real. And I think there is still this big black hole of fear of like all these milestones we're going to hit: Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. What is this going to look like? And nobody knows how to handle it.
Right. And I think some of the news from people gathering for weddings, or even, you know, Sturgis motorcycle rally, of how many people got sick from that. You know, yes, we're going to want to gather for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but, you know, the irony is if you have younger people who might be asymptomatic, who are probably out and about more than the rest of us, you know, I told my parents March 1st, we're not going to see you in person anymore. And my mom was surprised, but I said, you know, like, you're the people I love the most, so I'm going to be the most cautious with you. And I think we need to take some of that thinking into our calculations and just err on the side of caution. Like the downside is you don't see people. And so I think that whatever we can do to communicate and stay connected is so important. And you've got to be honest about what you need.
But then how do you regulate the need for extreme caution versus the need for socialization? I mean, I think this is the Venn diagram where we were all trying to figure out.
Exactly.
And so my daughter is able to go to in-person kinder camp every day. There is this, you know, equal parts joy and terror dropping her off. And you are now, like, I take it really seriously that we are beholden to these other families who are all in this together now, essentially. And the fear for me is not enough to keep my daughter home, because I see how important it is for her development at age 5. And so this is like this crazy place that we're all at, where it's like, okay, I do feel so strongly that kids should be back in school, but because not every school can really do it safely, what does that mean? What is this? I mean, I think these are the long hauler ethical questions we all have.
Yeah, and that's so difficult. And I think every parent will need to make that decision based on their comfort level and their child's needs and the family dynamics. And, you know, for households with a single parent or working parents, you know, it's a whole different level, right?
Of I mean, and it's the thing, it's like this privilege, the privilege of caution almost, right? Like, and then how does anybody battle this fatigue that I think both of us are feeling, where you're like, I just don't know if I can, you know, put on my combat boots and do this for much longer.
It's also, I've had to coach myself on being more outspoken, because I, like a lot of people, and maybe especially women, or maybe people of a certain age, have been so trained to be polite, and there are these social norms. But last night I was picking up food, and there are 3 people without masks going right up to the person who's delivering the food out of the little window, and they're 6 inches in her face, yelling at her their names to see if their order is ready. And I stepped up and I said, do you need a mask? Where's your mask? Or, you know, people wearing their mask under their nose. I said, oh, your mask has slipped. Please pull it up. Because it protects everybody.
Yep.
And it's the first time I've done that in public, and it's so uncomfortable for me. But if that were my daughter handing out the food, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect her. And I think we need to have this more communal, collective mindset of, we need to protect everybody in our community the best that we can. And then the community rates will come down, and then we can do more things. We can gather more safely together. We can bubble up or have our pod of the few people that we see on a regular basis. And it's also communicating clearly. Like early in the summer, the question was, or I guess even in March and April, both of my teenage girls, can we babysit? And that was a whole conversation, right? And then, like, how safe is that family being that they're babysitting?
Oh my God. Well, this is today. I mean, my kids are with our neighbor who's a babysitter, and it was raining because I was just going to have her walk them down and, get a Jamba Juice. And it's raining. And so now, I called my husband. I'm like, okay, are we cool with the kids being in our neighbor's house, knowing that they are super responsible? I completely trust their family, but you're like, is this really the right thing to do? And ultimately we decided it was, because we know that this family is as safe as we could possibly be. But I sent the kids with masks. We talked about it with the babysitter, and I'm like, if they feel more comfortable with their masks on inside, if you want them to have masks on inside, if you get there, like, they are prepared, right? These are the questions that as a parent, you just nothing prepares you for it.
Exactly. But you're right. We need social interaction. We need for our kids to go other places sometimes for, to be able to work for our own sanity. So there is some level of risk that we have to take on. So it's about the things that you can control. The more people who wear masks in grocery stores or in schools, the better.
And the kids, I've been shocked at kindergarten to see how okay with it the kids are.
I think at that age, they're
like, okay.
Do you remember the struggles of, I remember, sort of having to put some weight on my child when she didn't want to get in the car seat, but then you just say, okay, the car doesn't start until the seatbelt goes in the clicker.
Yes. If you would like to go to the park, there's one way to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those are the lines that we draw as parents for our child's safety. And I think we need to start thinking of masks in a similar way. Yeah. Okay, you want to go play with so-and-so? Grab your mask and you have to put it on. I remember when helmets weren't so common for bicycling or skateboarding. And now they're pretty accepted. I still see kids out and about and adults without them, but for the most part. So I think there's always that transition time.
Yeah.
And again, I'm, very far on one side of being cautious because I think I know a little bit too much. And then I'd rather I think even our healthcare professionals and scientists have learned so much in the past 7 or 8 months about this virus as an international community. Yep. That deaths are going down, even though cases are going up because, they've learned, put the patient in the prone position, let gravity help with forcing air out of the lungs. What's the optimal vent setting? Before they were trying to wait as long as they could before putting a patient on a vent, because that's usually how it works. That gives them the best chance. But now they're finding the oxygen levels go down so low without the patient being in distress, like with other things. It's very abnormal. So they're putting them on the vent earlier, but lower airflow settings, things like that. That may not be 100% accurate. I'm not a healthcare person and, haven't kept up to date because I've had to sort of wean myself off of reading all of this for my own sanity. But the point is, the longer you can put off putting COVID, the better. Because our healthcare system is learning and those professionals are learning. And so I just kudos to everybody who has been sheltering in place and wearing masks. And it's sad to me that we're at such a divided point in this country and people get their news sources from so many different places that there's not agreement on this very basic public health tool.
Yeah.
To wear a mask. And I jokingly say, like, I see you have a little trampoline. I jokingly say, like, when we were kids, we would crunch up crackers in our mouth and try not to have it mixed with the saliva at all. And you make it really fine. And then you jump on a trampoline and you talk to your friend and it'll crack you up because you'll see all these crumbs, fly.
Yeah.
And that's like the visual that I have when people aren't wearing a mask. I'm like, you are just spitting all over everything.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it.
Well, I think it's interesting too, where we're going to have to this winter just say, yeah, you come on over, slap that mask on and let's rock and roll. We're going to have to normalize masks inside. It's going to have to.
Does that mean I'm going to have to clean my house? Because nobody's been in my house since March 1st.
No, you don't need to clean your house. There's no judgment on that front at all.
That's been kind of nice.
Well, Ellen, I can't thank you enough on behalf of the tens of thousands now of frontline healthcare workers that you have taken care of. I can't wait to see what the second phase of this project is. Will you please give people information where they can donate money? You are still taking donations. I get the feeling that you are just in a little bit of a regrouping phase right now, but I suspect something will emerge. So tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. There's so many people that I have strong connections to that I'm going to want to deliver baskets of chocolate or delicious meals to this winter when it's dark and dreary here in Seattle. And we're still probably coping with all of this. So the website is up at wegotthisseattle.org, and there's a donate button there. It all goes to this 501c3. I don't touch a penny, which is great. I don't have to deal with that at all. We just the restaurant submits an invoice and it gets paid automatically by the nonprofit. And then there's a list of restaurants on there if you want to support any of the restaurants who have either donated or provided meals. I love what Amy from Portage Bay, one of the owners at Portage Bay, said to me early on. She said, just a caution that restaurant people are givers by nature. So if you ask, they will give, but they're struggling as well. And so that really was a good reminder to me. And I always said, what do you need me to pay for these meals? I didn't say, I need these meals and I'm going to pay you $10. It was sort of, what do you need to charge me? If you can give me a discount, it's very appreciated. And I always told them where it was going as well, even down to the site. Like, this is going to the International Community Health Services nonprofit clinic in the International District. And so people were motivated to help however they could. There's a list of sites as well that I've delivered to. It's not updated, but I'll try to get that done. And if people have suggestions, they can email. There's a form, a contact us, or just email wegotthisseattle@gmail.com and say, hey, I know this team hasn't gotten anything yet. Can you try to get something to this site? And that was really important to me. I've gotten pizza to the people who answer the phones at UW Medical Center, environmental services who keep everything clean, grocery store clerks, preschool teachers.
No one is getting left out.
Yeah, it's really broad. It's really anybody. So Ellen, let me know who I can help.
You are a shining beacon of an example that one person can make a difference with one idea and some really resourceful persuasion.
I think that's my superpower. Somebody asked me that and I said, it's persuasion. So yeah. It's one person who's persuasive, who has really, really awesome, talented friends.
Well, I can't wait to see the next iteration. And what's your Twitter handle?
Oh, Twitter is just at Ellen Kuwana. So ELLENKUWANA.
Follow her so we can all see the next iteration of We Got This Seattle. 6 months into a pandemic with no end in sight, I confess that I was hit with a tsunami of grief the week school started. We had a summer where I was able to table it, bury my emotions, and be there for my kids, but smacked with the reality of every single child out of school, my emotions were more than I could bury. I cracked and had a pretty tough week that I couldn't hide from my family. After our interview, Ellen sent me a tweet, which will be in my show notes, from a professor and author named Dr. Aisha Ahmed, describing the 6-month wall in any crisis. She describes that this wall of grief is completely normal, but also leads us into a period of greater innovation from which we can all move forward. She allows us to take a break, acknowledge the grief, and revel in the fact that we have managed to survive, to keep on loving, and that in and of itself is proof that we can move forward, that we have the courage and resourcefulness to just keep going. I've drawn a great deal of inspiration from that tweet, and as we are moving into the holiday season, I'm digging in and am now more determined than ever to innovate and create experiences that are joyful. We'll figure out a safe Halloween that will be memorable. And even though things will look a little bit different, we will continue celebrating the fact that we have a family, that we are together, and that as a community, we still have people like Ellen who are willing to put themselves on the line to help other people. Good is coming out of this, whether or not we choose to see it in any given moment. Thank you so much for listening. This week, please take a second to have a deeper conversation with somebody around you, because you truly never know what's happening right in front of your face. You can find me on the internet. I am at www.rightinfrontofmyface.net. I'm on Twitter at @InFrontOfMyFace. I am on Instagram at @RightInFrontOfMyFace, and I am also on Facebook. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this episode. I am relying on your help as listeners for ratings, reviews, and for sharing episodes that you think might touch somebody's heart.